Once upon a time, in a kingdom surrounded by deep, dark forests and high, snow-capped mountains, there lived a beautiful queen. One winter's day, as snowflakes gently fell from the sky, she sat by her window sewing, the frame of the window carved from black ebony wood. A single drop of blood fell onto the fresh, white snow resting on the windowsill. Watching the crimson bead, she whispered a wish to the wind. As she stitched, she pricked her finger with the needle. The king, heartbroken and lonely, remarried a woman of extraordinary beauty, yet her heart was cold and cruel. She was proud, vain, and possessed a dark secret, a magic mirror that could speak. I wish for a child with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as the ebony frame of this window, and so it was. A year later, the queen gave birth to a baby girl who was as beautiful as she had wished. They named her Snow White. But tragedy struck the kingdom when the kind queen fell ill and passed away. Every day, the queen would stand before it and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And each time, the mirror would reply. Her skin glowed like porcelain, her lips were like ripe cherries, and her hair was a cascade of midnight silk. "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but none as fair as you." She walked innocently, picking wild flowers, unaware of his grim purpose. But when he drew his dagger, his hands trembled. But as years passed, little Snow White blossomed into a young woman whose beauty surpassed even the queen's. One day, when the queen posed her usual question to the mirror, it gave a different answer. Her face darkened, and in a voice colder than ice, she ordered the royal huntsman to take Snow White deep into the forest and end her life. As proof, he was to bring back her heart. The branches scratched her skin, and the howling of wolves echoed through the trees. But just as fear began to overcome her, Snow White spotted a flickering light between the trees. Hope sparked within her heart, its windows glowed warmly, and the scent of soup drifted through the air. Hesitant but desperate, she knocked, then pushed the door open. She ran and ran until exhaustion claimed her, and she collapsed beneath a towering oak. Snow White was so weary she could barely stand. She tasted a little soup from each bowl, then, finding one just right, ate until her hunger was gone. She tried each little bed before curling up in the last one and falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. You, my queen, are fair. It's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you. The queen's heart twisted with jealousy. The huntsman led Snow White into the depths of the dark woods. They were 7 dwarfs who mined for precious gems and gold in the mountains. Snow White turned to him, her eyes wide with innocence. "Please, don't harm me," she whispered. His heart softened. He could not bring himself to harm her. Dropping the knife, he knelt before her. "Run, Snow White, run far away and never return. The queen wants your life." Tears streaming down her face, Snow White fled into the forest. Startled but unafraid, she sat up and introduced herself. "But beware, never open the door to strangers when we're away in the mines." She told them everything, of the wicked queen, the huntsman's mercy, and her desperate flight through the forest. Using her dark magic, she disguised herself as an old, bent peddler woman. As night fell, the forest seemed alive with strange noises, hoots, rustles, and unseen creatures peering from the shadows. A knock came at the door. Remembering the dwarf's warning, she called. She followed the light until it led her to a tiny cottage nestled between ancient oaks. Inside, everything was small and neat. 7 tiny chairs around a table set for 7 beds neatly made. Not long after, the cottage's owners returned home. "Someone's been eating my supper," cried one. Snow White's breath grew short, and she collapsed. "And someone's been sitting in my chair," said another. When they reached their bedroom, they gasped in unison. "Look, there's a girl sleeping in my bed." Learning that Snow White still lived, she brewed a poisoned comb, disguised herself once more, and returned. Snow White awoke to 7 curious, bearded faces peering at her. Quickly, they loosened the laces and she gasped for air, slowly reviving. The dwarfs, touched by her story, promised to keep her safe. "Stay here with us," they said. "We'll protect you." The instant the poison comb touched her scalp, she fell. She created a poisoned apple, so red, so perfect, that none could resist it. Snow White agreed gratefully, and from that day on, she kept the little cottage neat and warm, cooked delicious meals, and sang sweet songs to cheer their spirits. But far away in the castle, the queen stood before her mirror once more. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair." It's true, she fell, her hands slipping from the apple, her eyes closing as though in peaceful sleep. No charm, no magic, no medicine could wake her, but Snow White beyond the forest blue, with 7 dwarfs, is fairer than you, fury boiled inside the queen. She vowed to finish what the huntsman could not. Enchanted by her beauty, he begged the dwarfs to let him take her to his palace. The next day, while the dwarfs were at work, Snow White tidied the cottage, humming softly. "Who is it? An old woman with lovely laces, my dear. Come, see my fine wares." The jolt dislodged the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. Tempted, Snow White opened the window. "Oh, such beautiful laces," she marveled. "Let me lace up your bodice, dearie. Make you look lovelier still." Trusting and innocent, Snow White allowed the old woman in. But as the wicked queen pulled the laces tighter and tighter, the queen cackled and fled. The wicked queen, upon hearing that the new bride was fairer still, was consumed by her own evil and vanished from the kingdom forever. Luckily, when the dwarfs returned home, they found Snow White lying pale and still. The queen must have been here, they warned. "Do not open the door again," but the queen was relentless. "Comb your lovely hair, my sweet," she coaxed. Snow White, forgetting the warning, let the old woman comb her hair. Again, the dwarfs saved her. They removed the comb, and Snow White awoke. "Never open the door to anyone," they begged. For a third time, the queen turned to her dark arts. One bite, and she sleep forever. This time, disguised as a kindly peasant woman, she came again. "A lovely apple for the fairest maid." Snow White hesitated. "I mustn't. Look, I'll eat half. You eat the other," the woman offered. She bit one side, then handed Snow White the other. Trusting, Snow White took a bite. The poison worked instantly. When the dwarfs returned, their hearts broke. They placed her in a glass coffin in the forest glade, so all who passed might see her beauty. Time passed, seasons changed, but Snow White remained untouched, as beautiful as ever. One day, a prince traveling through the forest saw the glass coffin. "She belongs with those who love her," he pleaded. Moved by his kindness, they agreed. As the prince's servants lifted the coffin, they stumbled. She stirred, color returned to her cheeks. Slowly, she opened her eyes. "Where am I?" Joy burst through the forest as the prince fell to his knees. "You are safe, my love." In time, Snow White and the prince were wed in a grand ceremony. And so, peace returned. Snow White and her prince lived happily ever after.